Innovator's Dilemma is a graph. It's a book, but it's also a graph, right? So normal company grows, and then declines. And the reason why it declines is because being a privately held company, you get to a point where your company's worth something. In the beginning, it's not worth anything. So you're just willing to put it all out there and you're taking risk and you're just throwing stuff at it, right? And then at some point you get up here and you're like, oh, it's worth something. It's making money. I don't want to screw it up, right? So you stop and you plateau and you start declining before you even realize it. So the worst person to own a company is a risk-averse owner. And you have to constantly push yourself out of that comfort zone, right? And there's ways to do it.
Welcome to Encouraging Leaders, a podcast that exists to remind CEOs and aspiring CEOs that you don't have to lead alone. I'm Mark DeBron, and today I'm joined by a special friend and a CEO that's world-class, Alaina Macia. She's the president and CEO of MTM Transit, where she, under her leadership and her leadership team, have grown from 30 million to over $1 billion in revenue. But that's actually not the fun part. I love listening and learning from Alaina. The way she's done that is been able to do both purpose and profit, people and growth. And I believe that's what the world needs. So welcome, Alaina.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Mark. Happy to be here.
Yeah, it's so great to be with you. One question that I ask every CEO whenever they join this: when did you learn in your leadership journey that you didn't have to have all the answers, that you didn't have to lead alone, that you could actually get help from others?
I was just thinking about this coming in this morning and thinking about how, our, young adult career is all about, being the best in the classroom, getting to the best university, getting the best GPA, and it's so individually focused. When I joined the company, I had gone through the MBA program. And, you do a lot of team-based environment work there. So I had a little, entry into that. But I remember when I joined the company and we were scaling and growing and we had a lot of difficulties operationally, financially, et cetera. And I was trying to solve all the problems. And I felt like I had to protect people from bad news and bad information and just keep the engine going so people didn't get nervous or some people don't share information because I don't want them to see they're making money. And, there's all these reasons why people don't share information. But what I learned in a tough situation is people wanted to help me and they were frustrated that I wasn't sharing. They knew that I was under stress and that the company was under stress and they wanted to help. And so I remember it was this, unannounced 360 review in the boardroom where they finally told me like, hey, you need to let us help you. And it was a real, humbling moment that I realized that I wasn't being the best leader I could be. And that was the most frustrating for me because I like to lead people. I like to inspire. I like for the company to grow. And so to know that I was letting them down by not letting them help me really disappointed myself. And so when I did start sharing information with them, we solved our problems quicker, right? It's just, 20 people rowing in the same direction versus one trying to push the whole, cart is, works a lot more effectively.
It seems so obvious from this side after you've done it.
Right.
But you mentioned there's a lot of reasons why leaders don't share the burdens, that they don't share the challenges, don't share the problems. What I hear there is they weren't having the opportunity to grow and learn and to be of service to you and to the organization. You were stealing that from them because you weren't sharing the problems. They didn't get to test it.
A players want to help. A players want to solve the big problems. They want to be, everybody wants the power seat, right? And so if you let them into that power seat, they feel more connected, they feel more motivated, and they feel more accountability and ownership. Because you're always saying, why aren't people taking ownership? Why aren't people taking accountability? Well, if you're not letting them truly, they're not going to be able to.
Yeah, so our responsibility as leaders to be able to invite them in. It invites them into ownership. It invites them into the ownership of the problems and challenges. You have built an incredible team over these when did you step into the president CEO role?
About 2 years after I joined, 2005, so nearly 20 years.
What a journey.
Can't believe it.
What has been key for you as you've been attracting talent into that team, developing talent into that team? What's been some of the keys for you as you've been doing that?
Yeah, well, looking for the team players, growing from within where we can. It's, cultural fit is always the hard part, no matter what you do to screen a candidate. We do things like have the psychology tests, right? And then we spend a lot of time with the candidate, but you can still make mistakes. And what I found is every time that we recruited from within, it was much more successful, right? So that means that you have to have a plan, though. You have to be thinking about your bench. You have to be thinking about succession plan for every single one of your employees. And it takes a lot of work. And I think when people think of succession planning, they think of themselves, they think of the CEO role, and it's way more than that. It's throughout your entire organization, because what you want is kind of like that farm team mentality. We're here in St. Louis with the Cardinals, farm team. You want them to come from within because they're a cultural fit. They understand the business. And the more people you have on deck, the more opportunity you have to find the right person for the next seat.
Yeah, I think about the development of the team. I love the farm team example. It's just a lot higher likelihood of success if you can actually develop it inside instead of trying to attract an executive from the outside.
Yeah, and we made mistakes along the road. I'm not, we've ended up here, right? And we still will make mistakes. There's no perfect way to hire a person, but yeah, you reduce your odds of failure by recruiting from within.
Yeah. As president CEO, what percentage of your time and focus is on that team, that development, that building up of that group?
I meet with all of my team players once a month. We meet all day for once a month. And so during those times, we're going over, what are our key issues? What's our org structure look like? Do we have the talent for the next step, for the thing that we're not addressing? Do we have one person assigned to that? So it's constant. And at the same time, you're trying to maintain your margin, improve your margin. So you're constantly looking at, do you have the right talent? Do you have the right people in the right seat? Do you have the right structure to be successful? And with acquisitions and growth, it becomes even more important to make sure you've got that right alignment. So I'd say when it comes down to it, it's probably 25% of my time, because people are linked to processes, they're linked to outcomes, right?
Yeah, you're always having that in your head. Do I have the right person leading that part of the business? Are they getting the right attention? Do they need help and support? In those times, I find that, the ability to shift formations to be able to succeed in the next phase of growth is really critical. What's helpful to be able to have people thinking, it might be the role that I'm in, or it might be a different role that I need to take to be able to help us all win? How do you get that team mentality into that team so that they're willing to shift responsibilities to just for the success of the business?
Well, first of all, people take a lot of pride. You don't want to approach it from you're failing. It's not a people problem, right? And a lot of times we'd reorg and we say, oh, we'll just move this department over here and that'll solve the problem. Well, no, that's not the solution. A lot of times it's a process issue, and a lot of times it's a, alignment issue. And so helping people understand that it's not necessarily them. It could be that we are not structured correctly as a company is really important. And we just went through a reorganization where we put more responsibility at the local level. COVID happened. We had trips decrease across the country. People went remote, worked from home, and then, COVID ends and trips increase, and all of a sudden we need, more local market attention, right? And so just explaining that, people understand that. People understand that, your organizational structure impacts your ability to be successful. And so being honest and transparent about it is important. Communication is important. Change, as we all know, is difficult. You have to understand, you have to let people go through the change process. They might not love it the first time they hear it. It might take 3 or 4 times before they buy into it. And the best part is when they finally start telling you it's their idea and you're like, Okay, great. I love that it's your idea.
No kidding. Yeah, it goes back to that ownership. It goes back to transparency. If you're not transparent with your problems, which many, many CEOs are not, they can't actually understand the reasons for the change. And so they think it's done to them instead of with them. And
Right.
so when you're transparent, it allows them to come alongside you and try to solve the problem. And then they're starting to see, like, I think we need to move organizational structure. Like,
Right.
I think you're right. Let's go. And it's their idea. And now they're behind it and with you and leading it.
Well, if you think about it, all relationships, whether it's your marriage, your friendships, with your children, it's about trust, right? And trust is around information, communication, and transparency. So that's the building blocks of getting everybody aligned.
Yeah, I love the relationship word for leadership is just it's a relationship. You're leading someone and in a team that's very complex dynamics in a relationship, but just the foundation of trust. You said something there built on sharing and learning together, sharing information back and forth, what it is that I feel, how I feel about different tasks that we're doing or strategies that we're executing against, and allowing them to share their feelings as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know you're a member of YPO. I am as well. Tell me a little bit about in Forum, we get to practice that relationship building. Tell me how has that been helpful to you in being able to develop the sharing mentality and building relationships?
Yeah, I think, YPO, we get trained on how to be part of a forum and how to share information and learn from each other, but not tell and not say, well, you're not doing this right. You should do it this way. No, you say, I had an experience where I was doing it this way and then I changed and then the outcome improved. And so you learn through shared experiences, not through being told what to do. Nobody likes to be told what to do. Nobody. That's why it's so hard to tutor your kids. It's just something I outsource happily so that there's not tears in the house because your kids don't want to be told, right? And so the best way, I always talk to my husband about, we're setting a good example. They're watching us. They're learning from us. We don't have to tell them all the time, right? Lecturing people. It just doesn't work.
Yeah.
It's totally a turnoff. So making sure that sometimes you get frustrated in business and sometimes you just want to tell, right?
Yeah.
You know the answer. You've been running this business for forever. You're like, I'm right. Well, take off the hero cape. Nobody likes the hero. And just lay out the problem, lay out the data, and talk about how to solve it.
Yeah, it's collaborative. I mean, I think the parallels. We've got aging kids now. They're all two of them are out of the house, and watching them shift from at age 3 and 5, you got to tell them where to go and how to do. And it's very early that they shift to wanting to collaborate. And I love the forum experience that you mentioned, which is trying to learn non-judgmental listening and then non-advice giving, but experience sharing. And to be able to do that over and over and taking that into the business and being able to use those same skills inside of the business to be able to build a team and build relationships and not have to be a know-it-all is a powerful example. Sometimes we learn through challenges. And so I know that you've got 20 years under your belt now as president CEO. When you think back on a challenging time and having to lead through it, does one come to mind that in a challenge that you've been able to come through and be able to learn through together as a team?
Yeah, we were scaling pretty rapidly at one point, and we hadn't expanded the team properly. I had recruited an advisory board and sharing with them some of the challenges. And they said, look, you're shouldering too much of the work and you need a number of positions to help you on the leadership team. And we opened up 3 new positions. It took a while to get the right person in the right seat. First person wasn't necessarily the right fit. Oftentimes it was the second person or somebody they had recruited onto their team. And eventually we got there, and that just allowed me to be more successful. It allowed there to be more oversight and responsibility at the appropriate layers. But it was a very collaborative process with my team. Instead of saying, hey, I'm adding 3 people, we worked on what the org chart should look like. We worked collaboratively on what the job descriptions, who we were looking for. We interviewed them collaboratively. it wasn't something that I did in a silo by myself. And so when you do that, the person didn't work out, but we all made that decision together. So, and then we all made the decision when it was time to exit that person and bring somebody in new. So it makes it more of a team-based approach, and nobody's going, oh, we're a failure. No, we're learning, we're getting better, we're taking the next step.
Yeah, it's a good one. When to add people or roles inside of your direct team. What I heard there also is you were open to outside advice from an advisory board, so they knew you well enough because you had given them time to get to know you, to be able to say and challenge you. They said, you're not actually doing this well enough to do it at the level that you need to do it. You need to make changes.
Yeah.
I love that example because so often, sometimes we're good enough to get to the point where we'll listen to the team, but the team is inside the system. And so sometimes they can't see the mess any more than we can because we're just looking inside. And so tell me about that, bringing what the decision was to bring on an advisory board. When was that and how did that happen? And
it was, it was probably around 2016. So nearly almost 8 years ago. And I knew we wanted to keep growing. I knew best practice was to have an advisory board and to bring that outside in. I always felt like when the business transformed, it was because we learned something from the outside. To your point, we already know what we know. It's what we don't know. And for a long time, I was just heads down, growing the business, growing, scaling. I didn't join YPO. I didn't join networks. I didn't have outside advisors. And that shift when I finally decided to join YPO, join other business groups, bring in the advisory board is when it really expanded my horizon on what was possible. And, inflection points, in 2019 with COVID, we had just bought out the founders. We had all this debt that we signed up for. COVID happens. We don't know what the world's going to look like. It's like a panic moment. So I reached out, called somebody in my Rolodex, and he gave me the best advice. And he said, what problem are you trying to solve? I said, well, I need more time. Personally, I'm exhausted. You can solve that. You can hire people to help you, right? And then there was, well, we're all in. We've got all the wealth tied to this business. You can solve that problem. You can do distribution. You can diversify. These are solvable problems. And so and it's not personal to them, right? So it's personal to you, but when you go outside, they can give you a rational business response because they're not emotionally tied to the business.
I just think about that, opening yourself up. It's vulnerable to say, hey, listen, I'm struggling right now. I've been growing the business really well. It's a time whenever I'm underwater as a leader and I reach out for help. That particular habit is so beautiful to watch and witness, and it's been so powerful for me. Sometimes I've had my wife, she says, I think it's time for you to call the coach, call him now. And so it's just having people and then listening to those small signals, whether it's you're underwater or somebody inside says you need to get help. And then you call out, and then the problems for that person weren't as big as the problems for you, partially because they were removed from it and partially possibly because they've been through. And so I think about those kind of people in my life, the coaches, the mentors, the advisors that have either gone through the challenge that I'm going through, and it's not a big deal to them. They're like, just make this decision. And I'm like, how come that was so hard for me and not hard for you? And they've been through it.
Yes. And that's that whole, back to the YPO forum, the whole sharing, being vulnerable. And sometimes when you say it out loud, you solve your own problem, right? Or you already know the answer. You just don't want to do it because it's uncomfortable, right?
Yeah.
Like telling your team, hey, we got to add somebody, or you might, and they take it personally, right?
I find that almost all of those stucks in my own life, I call that being stuck. You were stuck for a moment, and then you reach out for help, and then you get unstuck. And it's beautiful. And then your team starts to help you, and then you're moving back into normal operating condition and feeling calm and confident while you lead. Each step along the path, there's ceilings, we just hit them and then we're stuck, and then we get past it. And if we learn from it, we're not stuck anymore. You have busted through ceiling after ceiling revenue wise, which is often a place where people get stuck. They get stuck at 30 or 60 or 80 or 100. What's the next one for you? Where do you, like, can you feel it coming? Because there's another one.
Right. Well, I'll just give a little history on getting unstuck first before I answer that question. So, Innovator's Dilemma is a graph. It's a book, but it's also a graph, right? So normal company grows, and then declines. And the reason why it declines is because being a privately held company, you get to a point where your company's worth something. In the beginning, it's not worth anything. So you're just willing to put it all out there and you're taking risk and you're just throwing stuff at it, right? And then at some point you get up here and you're like, oh, it's worth something. It's making money. I don't want to screw it up, right? So you stop and you plateau and you start declining before you even realize it. So the worst person to own a company is a risk-averse owner. And you have to constantly push yourself out of that comfort zone, right? And there's ways to do it. So you can take a distribution, put it aside so that you can feel like I've got some eggs outside of this basket now. And then now you can take risk again in the business. So it's important to make sure you have the right capital structure to allow you to keep growing. And so the other piece that happened to us was we had never taken on debt. So when I looked to sell in that 2019 period, because I got nervous, I got great offers from private equity firms, and I just looked at their playbook, and they said, okay, we're going to put debt on you so you can buy companies, and you're going to roll over your equity, and because we want you to stay in and have skin in the game. And I thought to myself, well, I've got the equity. I don't need any more of that. What I need is the confidence to take on the debt to buy other companies to grow. And so that's what we did. And we've been able to self-fund through traditional banking arrangements and not have to take any outside investment to scale to the $2 billion mark. And yay, we did it. We were about 500 million when we decided to make that move. And it was about 3 years ago. So we've almost quadrupled the business in that time period. Now we're going to have to take a minute and consolidate that growth before we can grow again. So it's going to be a period of a couple of years where we're just getting the scale out of the business, getting, the integration, synergies, and then we can do it again. So we will push again, probably try to grow to the $5 billion mark, but we need to get some things in order first before we do that.
So much gold in that. You started with The Innovator's Dilemma. What a beautiful book. And that it's a curve and it happens at every stage, every ceiling. You sit there and you say, this was worth enough to not take risk. And so an owner that's not willing to take risk can't grow the business because growth and risk are tied. You have to realize that you're at that spot and you were at that spot. And then you went out and you started to look at options and you're watching, they're willing to take the risk that I'm not willing to take at the point in time. Mm-hmm. And you said, am I willing to take the risk that they're willing to take? Because I've got all the cards, I can do that. I can decide to be willing to take the risk, or I can pause and not be willing to grow anymore.
Exactly. And I think that the way to get through those things is to financially model what your business would look like by taking on debt and making acquisitions, and what the business would look like in 3 to 5 years with that acquisition strategy and without. And be honest about, it's basically option pricing models, right? If I do this, it goes up. If I don't do this, it goes down. And I think that when you put financial models and data to your problems, it makes them less scary and gives you the answer.
Yeah, for you, that calmed your nerves and allowed you to make a decision to stay in the risk game and keep growing and building. And so I love it. Whatever it is that gets you over that hurdle, whether it's modeling or pro formas or outside counsel or coaches or whatever it is, you're the one that gets to decide if you're going to grow beyond that risk profile that you've got, or if you're going to stay stuck. And it's okay. What I love about it is you admit that it's my decision, or the leader's decision, the owner's decision, and you get to decide, what do I want and what am I willing to do to get it?
Because not everybody's comfortable with risk personally. Mm-hmm. And so this could be so uncomfortable that would make you unhappy.
Yeah.
well, then that's not right for you either, right?
Yeah.
So it has to also make you want to get up and go to the office and work. And if it doesn't, then that's not the answer for you.
Well, and then you can turn it over to an owner that actually wants to take on that risk
Yeah.
and allow that to happen. And so it can be either employees, or it can be outside, it can be inside, it can be wherever it is. But I really think that you said one thing that I'd like for you to repeat. The greatest danger, or the greatest thing, is to have an owner that isn't allowed to be risky.
Yes.
Tell me what that statement was again.
Well, so I said the worst person to own a business is an owner who won't take risk.
Yeah, so that's it. The worst person to own a business is a person that won't take risks,
Yeah.
an owner that won't take risks. And ownership is risky.
It is. Inherently, it's risky. And business is risky.
Business is risky. Life is risky. Love is risky. And it's worth the risk. That's, for me, that's what I've decided over and over and over.
Yeah.
There's risk in life, and it's worth it.
That's why you ride a roller coaster, right? Because you like the feeling of being scared and then, the adrenaline rush afterwards, right? So appropriate levels.
I don't know of another way to live. I mean, the reality is life in general, if you're going to keep on doing it with others, with humans, it's risky. And so unfortunately, you don't get to do it only safe. Safe doesn't exist. What I love about the role that I play and the roles that I get to watch, CEOs growing, is because if they learn that, they can go back and deploy that anywhere. They can help their kids get over the risk factor, because high school is risky.
Yeah.
College is risky.
Putting yourself out there.
Driving is risky.
Mm-hmm.
All of the things in life that love is risky. Mm-hmm. And so just learning that it's actually part of what life is, and we get to get over it again, and you keep on growing. It is so fantastic to watch you continue to grow and to learn that next level of risk taking. And so many people will be learning from you on this. If you came back, 2005, you step into the president's role. Last question. What would you tell that younger version of yourself? What piece of leadership advice, life advice would you give?
Yeah, get your network earlier, ask for help earlier, right? It's hard to learn to do it, and it's uncomfortable to do it. But once you start, it gets easier. And what's the value in repeating a mistake somebody else has already made, and who can tell you how to avoid it, right? Or solutions to avoid it. And you just solve that problem quicker. So there's a great quote, a master carpenter, it doesn't make any less mistakes than a novice carpenter. They just know how to fix them faster. So go to the masters and ask them for help, because they know how to fix your problems faster than you do.
I love it. Ask for help earlier, build your network earlier, and it will make for an easier, faster way to get over those risk hurdles, those glass ceilings that are in your life. That if you're stuck, if you have a chance, and you want to get unstuck, would love to have a conversation. Come learn from Alaina. Happy to spend 15 minutes with you as well. You can find me at encouragingleaders.com. Would love to hear where you're stuck and how we can potentially get you over that hurdle and go out and lead with confidence and calmness. Alaina, it is so awesome to be with you. Thank you for spending the time. And everybody who's listening, thank you for your attention.
Thanks for having me. Happy to share.
Pleasure.